Arrived at an interesting time. There's lots on your agenda, and of course you've got an expanded role from your predecessor with further education and higher education, and we'll be talking about those issues today. So it is a pleasure to have you here, and we're going to complete this really by about 11:30.
Okay, that sounds great.
So just so you've got 2 hours of opportunity to express your views and answer our questions, so thank you. Yesterday, this committee held a conference entitled The Purpose and Quality of Education. It's basically aimed at engaging with stakeholders beyond just this complex. We want to reach out to all, the whole world of education, so to speak. It's really inspired by the fact that over the last 40 odd years or so, we've had lots of changes in education. But the question of really where we're going is an important one. So what is your vision about the purpose of education? What do you think it is?
Our Prime Minister's talked about making sure that Britain is a country where everyone can be successful no matter where they start. And education is clearly at the heart of how we're going to ensure that happens. I don't believe that anybody's starting point in life should define where they finish. I didn't accept that for myself, and I don't think we should accept it for anyone else. So education is at the heart of how we tackle that issue of improving social mobility. For me, it means that we need to get children coming out of our education system with the knowledge and the skills, with access to the right advice at the right time, but also having had the chance to have the right kinds of experiences, whether in terms of extracurricular activities or indeed later on work experience, so they have a rounded approach that means that they can then be successful in life. And how do you do that? Well, that means that at the heart of it, we have to make sure we have enough great school places for every child. That was part of our Conservative manifesto at the last election. That means more good schools, it means excellent leadership, it means more great teachers, it means a broad, stretching, academic-based curriculum. It also means improving pathways after school, whether an academic pathway that many children and young people may want to pursue getting into university, but also it means significantly strengthening the technical and vocational pathways that actually most of our young people will follow who don't actually go to university. I think the fact that we have a broader department that now has all of these things under one roof really does give us a golden opportunity to make a difference by not just having a series of government policies working in isolation, but we can really bring it together and make the whole of that work even more powerfully. I think improving social mobility is a generational challenge. We won't just fix this generational challenge overnight, but I certainly plan to make sure that my department plays a central role in starting to move our country in the right direction for the long term.
Okay, thank you very much. Your in tray is probably fairly full, but is there an item you could select for us which is probably the most important, the most pressing?
Management now. Given the recent poor record of financial management, how will you ensure that the department has the capacity to handle its new areas of responsibility? How, for example, will the department cope with balancing the funding needs of higher education, schools and further education?
Well, we work with Treasury clearly on our spending review settlement. We had a good spending review settlement last year that did protect schools funding. I think I probably am the only chartered accountant sat round the cabinet table, so hopefully I should have a pretty strong technical skill set to be able to get a clear sense of not just whether we've got the right sizing, if you like, Marion, across our different parts of the department, but also critically that we're driving value for money and we have a good, clear sense of what value for money represents.
But when Chris Wormald came here in March and told us that no approach to accounting for academies could be guaranteed to work, is this a problem at the heart of the academies programme, And what are the implications for the effective management of public money? This was the real issue the committee found.
And indeed, that's something I am looking at very carefully. I'm very well aware that academies are spending taxpayers' money, and we want to make sure that it represents good value for money, but also there are strong controls over it. I think overwhelmingly that is the case. But I think you're right to highlight the fact that we should be asking ourselves systematic questions as academies really bed down as part of our education system to make sure that we're content that we've got the right controls and that actually broadly we have set ourselves up to broadly deliver value for money.
I think as well the real difficulty we had was the integration of the academy accounts into the department's accounts, and that there is no real synergy, and there have been make-up solutions to get us through the next wee while. But this is going to be an ongoing programme, and it's going to be an ongoing problem. So are you going to put steps in place to mitigate this and to actually end this lack of integration?
I mean, the short answer is yes. It is complicated, as you say. It's not made any more simple by the fact that obviously there's an academic year that...
Your predecessor had an aspiration that all schools would become academies. That was the thrust of the white paper. Do you still retain the aspiration of your predecessor to move towards a fully academised school system eventually?
Yeah, I do want to see all schools over time become academies, but I think our focus has got to be on the schools that are struggling and not doing well enough for children at the moment. And I think our hope and expectation is actually that schools will want to steadily take advantage of the benefits that academies can bring, but our focus will be on those schools where we feel that standards need to be raised and they need to do a better job of delivering attainment and progress for children.
Do you feel there's a strong enough evidence base to back that approach?
Yes, I do. I think we've seen academies turn around many schools in our country. It's the beginning of a long-term reform. You're absolutely right, Ian. So it's important that we see this through. But I think it really has delivered. We've got 1.4 million more children in good or outstanding schools. But at the heart of this, of course, is understanding that the determinant of a child's education outcomes is great teaching and behind that strong leadership. And I think that's what academies have enabled to happen more effectively. We've got a long way to go, but we also need to ask ourselves other questions about what more it's going to take, particularly in areas where children just don't have access to a good school place. How we get more good school places, which is why we launched the consultation this week, and we're having the debate that we're having about what it's going to take to really make sure that every child can benefit from the reforms that we've brought forward and the benefits that so many millions of others are. There's still some that aren't, and we can't leave that on one side.
But you've used the statistic there which implies that the 1.4 million extra children who are in good or outstanding schools are in academies, and that's not the case. Some of those children will be in academies, but many of them are also in improved, voluntary aided and maintained schools. Would you accept that's the case?
We've seen many different schools across our country do a better job of delivering for our children, and that's great news. I think what it says, Ian, is that it's not just about schools becoming academies. Actually, it's the changes to curriculum reform that we've brought forward. I think the nature of the curriculum and how we're making that more academic in nature. I also think that over time we've seen schools learn how to do a much stronger job on school improvement. So what we tried to do, and I think successfully in many areas, is move towards a school-led improvement system. So schools helping themselves and in doing so actually lifting everybody's performance. That's been incredibly effective. And again, I come back to those areas where we still see weak educational outcomes. I think we really need to say, well, how can we put those building blocks of success into the areas where currently, they're still not? That's not an uncomplicated thing to do. If it was easy, I think our reforms would have started to deliver in many of those areas. We need to go beyond those, and that's what we're setting out this week. But that's part of, I think, how we can help those children and, dare I say, enable teachers in schools to be able to really get on with helping those children learn.
Your predecessor was also open to the committee scrutinising the Education for All bill. Would you retain the instinct that it would be good for the Select Committee to do pre-legislative scrutiny?
Well, I guess that's probably a matter in some respects for the committee, but I've no doubt that whatever process we have on this Education for All bill, when we finally bring it forward later in the year, there'll be a lot of scrutiny on it. So in a sense, I'm not particularly worried about whether it won't be scrutinised enough, because I'm absolutely sure that it will.
So is the bill being sort of prepared now, or is there some sort of timetable which might be sort of more longer term?
I'm pulling it together, Neil, and you'll no doubt see later in the year what it comprises. I mean, obviously it's taking forward the white paper that came out earlier in the year.
If we're going to be scrutinising it in terms of pre-legislative status, we'd need a draft bill. Are you thinking of doing that?
Let me come back to the committee with some kind of a proposal on a way forward, but what I want to do is make sure that the bill that we bring forward is a strong one, and that's where my focus is at the moment. But as I said, I've absolutely no doubt that it will get very scrutinised as it passes through Parliament.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Right, Suella, multi-academy trusts, sort of the next step forward, so to speak.
The government's white paper set out the objective
that leads to improvements.
Evidence to the committee highlights a growing problem with the accountability of multi-academy trusts. The committee has recommended previously that Ofsted should be empowered to inspect them trusts. Do you agree that that should be allowed?
It's one of the areas I'm looking at. I think that where there is this consistent family and ethos, I think you're right to put that on the agenda, Stephen. So it's one of the areas that I think we need to reach a conclusion on it. Okay. And we need to take a decision whether we should or we shouldn't, and be clear-cut about the rationale for doing that. My sense is there is a question to be asked about how Ofsted can effectively inspect MATs, and whether there's a smarter way to do it that is not just good in terms of understanding how MATs are operating overall, but also can hopefully work for schools, so that when we're looking at a consistent school, the Ofsted inspector perhaps can and should take more into account the MAT that it's part of, and an assessment of that MAT. I should also say, though, that we need to be clear that some of these other issues I talked about, governance, financial sustainability, risk management, those are not necessarily things that Ofsted per se would necessarily have the expertise to particularly take a view on. So it is important that for the DFE we're clear cut on how we assess those broader governance structures that are really beyond where Ofsted would normally look, but actually are really important if MATs are going to operate successfully.
So are you suggesting that someone other than Ofsted might inspect MATs?
I'm saying that whichever way you need to gain assurance on the broad performance of MATs, that is less about, if you like, how per se a school is operating, and more about how a MAT per se is governed and run generally, that you need to have the right person with the right skills. So, I wouldn't ask an accountant for legal advice. So all I'm saying is that we need to sort of get the right person looking at the issues, but that's precisely why we've got the growth check.
Yes. I think you're agreeing that MATs ought to be inspected by somebody, but you seem to be suggesting it might be somebody other than Ofsted would do that job. And if so, who might that be?
Stephen, these are the questions that I am asking myself. What I'm saying, though, is I think that we need to have quite a thoughtful approach to ensuring that MATs are able to deliver. We also respect autonomy, of course, but at the same time we want to have a system where we can head off problems before they arrive, rather than deal with them after.
I think what we'd urge is that MATs shouldn't be let off the hook, that somebody does need to look at them. The accountability...
So I would be very happy for the committee to send me through thoughts on work that the committee's already looked at in this area, which I think is possibly also underway.
We are doing an inquiry on...
We are doing an inquiry on what a good multi-academy trust looks like, and the issues that Stephen has raised are the ones that we certainly will be commenting on. Now, you did mention the MAT Growth Health Check, which sounds good to me. Is that a public document, and is it something that we could have sight of?
I don't believe it's a public document, Neil, and why don't you let me get back to the department and see whether it's in a state that we can give you sight of. I think what I was trying to do is just give you a sense of the range of things that we would look at when we judge whether we feel a MAT's in a position to grow.
Okay, thank you. Stephen.
There is this growing problem of accountability about MATs, and I think it's likely to get worse if, as the white paper proposed, elected parents are removed from academy government.
One last question.
Yes. The area reviews in some parts of the country have reported, in my part in Hampshire in the Solent region, just issued its recommendations. How do you think the reviews will affect wider post-16 provision?
These are jigsaw pieces of a broader strategy around post-16. It sits alongside, for example, the work around making sure. So Adrian Smith's review on maths. The local area reviews are now underway. A number of them have already come up with recommendations, and they really are about making sure that we can have an FE sector that is financially sustainable, but critically one that is properly delivering for local employers and employment, so that there is that strong, clear pathway for our young people in terms of what they're doing post-16 on FE, but then the career routes that come out of that study that they're engaged in.
Quick question from Catherine.
Do you share very serious concerns about the proposed apprenticeship funding rates that were published in August, that they will see current rates paid to college and training providers for 16 to 18-year-olds cut by up to 50% in some of the most deprived parts of the country? Does she have any concerns about how that will fit in with her social mobility ambitions?
Well, it's a consultation, and we need to get on with the apprenticeships levy. It is important that business contributes to making sure that the young people our economy needs and business needs are being properly trained. We're looking very carefully to make sure that we see opportunities for apprenticeships across the country. This is about more apprenticeships and better apprenticeships rather than less. So the consultation is underway. We will look really carefully at all of the responses, Catherine. I think it's important that employers can work looking at this.
Thank you, Catherine. William?
Just touch on, of course, Brexit means Brexit and we're all Brexiteers now. So what does, with that similar instruction from the Prime Minister, what opportunities have you identified in your department that Brexit presents?
I think it particularly means for education. We really have a lot to offer the rest of the world, and whether it's on higher education or indeed, people were talking about, the fact that our teachers are in demand. I think it does give us more freedoms, frankly, to work collaboratively with other countries on the education sector as an export for us. You look at some of our initial teacher training and the higher education institutes that are doing that. Many of them are also doing work around the world on teacher training, which is not just good for the institutions, but it's good for Britain and our soft power, and it's good for our exports. So I think it opens up that. At the same time, though, I don't think we should shy away from the fact that this is a significant step for our country, a decision that we've taken. There are a number of areas that I need to work very carefully on, not least and in particular the university and higher education sector. And those are the things that I'm truly focused on, making sure that we manage our way through the Brexit proposals effectively.
Okay, and on that, so how would you respond to those who say that, for example, the Higher Education Research Bill needs a fundamental rethink on the basis of our exiting the European Union? How would you respond to that?
I just don't agree. I think it's all the more reason that we have in place some 21st century reform for universities, and I think that's precisely how we'll make sure we keep a world-beating university sector.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so are there a couple of questions on Ofsted?
Yes. Ofsted, or pressure from Ofsted, is often cited as one of the top three, cited by teachers as one of the top 3 reasons for leaving the profession. And often because of its arbitrary methods of assessment, prescribing an Ofsted preferred teaching style, being quite interventionist, having inconsistent reports. Do you have plans to change Ofsted's role and structure?
Well, I was talking to one of my local head teachers about their experience in Ofsted inspections only over the last few days. I think it's really important that I do listen to teachers, and not just their experience on Ofsted, but just more broadly about, you know, what's going on in classrooms and how they feel, you know, we need to take forward education reform. So I did want to be clear about that, actually, and I'm aiming and looking forward to getting out and about so I can, you know, meet as many teachers and get into as many schools as I can over the coming